The biggest thing is trust. You just have to trust it. Otherwise, I mean, there's moments along that journey where you think you're kind of going a little crazy,
Yeah.
but you just got to trust it. When I started to work with Archangel Michael, that's when the Ascended Masters started to come as well. I communicate with them through conversation, but it's not always just like a conversation we're having now. It can be, but it's also through metaphor and synchronicities and symbols and signs. And they slowly but surely taught me my language of how I communicate with the divine.
Guy here. Welcome to my podcast. My beautiful guest today is Denise Benning. And what I find fascinating about this conversation today and also about this journey so far is that so often, like when you start thinking about energy body, the chakras, light body, rainbow body, whatever, all these metaphysical terms and experiences and way out concepts that you hear, once you start going beyond the five senses, I've done enough podcasts and spoken to enough people now and scientists and things that we only perceive less than 1% of reality through our sensory experiences. So the bigger question is, well, what else is out there? What's the 99% that we can't perceive directly? And as we go inward and as we start exploring, we can start to connect. We can connect to that divine intelligence, that divine ever presence of energy. And as we developed our awareness, we can almost start to not only feel it, experience it, but it's like a crystallization. There's like a forming of that energy around us. But many, many discussions. And if you're watching this today, I have no doubt you can relate to it at some. So it's not just a concept. It's not just this information that's feeding the analytical mind, but there's a knowing behind it. And that's certainly why I'm so passionate about it, because once you start tuning into that, another presences start to show up of information and beings. It's quite profound when you experience them, because nobody can take that away from you. So anyway, Denise's journey is a bit like that. We get into all that, and we get into her journey with working with ascended masters and then angelic beings in those realms as well. I'm always a little bit cautious when using certain words because it instantly conjures up certain belief systems, but I have no doubt people listening here, we can get beyond that and really enjoy her podcast today. I know I certainly got a lot out of it. Yeah, if you're on YouTube, let me know in the comments below what you think about it, where you're from. Connect. Anyway, enjoy this podcast. Much love from me, and hopefully I'll meet you in person someday, somewhere on one of our retreats or experiences. Much love. Denise, welcome to the podcast.
It's such a pleasure to be here. Thank you for the invitation.
You're very welcome. I love how synchronicity just brings people together. And I randomly stumbled across you last month, I think it was. And I thought, I got to reach out. Hopefully she'll come on. And I love how it brings people together. You're in Canada. I'm in Australia, different parts of the world having these conversations.
We're probably in different dates too.
That's right. Yeah, it's very early where I am. So my first question to you is very simple, which I ask everyone, is that if you're at a little dinner party and a complete stranger sat next to you and asked you what you did for a living, how would you respond these days?
I think these days I would tell them I'm an energetic wellness practitioner and an intuitive. That's how I sort of frame what I do, sort of at the foundational level. And then if they're a little more curious and want to know exactly what that means, I'll talk about being an energy healer, maybe a divine channel, psychic mediumship. What I really do, sort of the basis of my work, which is really evolved over the last few years, is helping people find a deeper understanding of the nature of their soul and connecting with their divine self and their inner radiance, that light that shines within, and doing it in multiple different ways.
Totally. It definitely depends on the person sitting in front of you quite often. Mm-hmm. And I'm curious as well, when you talk about the divine self and the soul, mm-hmm. have you always felt that within you through your entire life, or have you just kind of woken up to this?
I have just kind of woken up. I've been doing this for 6 years now. I woke up when I was 50, And it's been quite a journey. I would say that as a growing up and through the earlier parts of my life, if I look back now, I probably had 5 or 6 of those experiences that I would say were intuitive or connected to like a psychic mediumship kind of experience, an intuitive experience, but I didn't fully accept it, or if I talked about it, I was kind of maybe shut down a little bit about it. So, and I was interested
Okay.
on, about like near death experiences and those types of things. And I used to like to watch mediums on TV, but I never really allowed myself to delve into it. And I used to read the books in secret. Like I was so glad when ebooks came because nobody could see what you were reading.
I know the feeling. I remember buying Conversations with God in like the year 2000 or something and feeling awkward when reading that
Yeah,
book.
yeah,
Backpacking. Yeah.
right. And then when I had an awakening experience in a temescal in Mexico. I was there on a retreat that was for the first time sort of had a spiritual side to it. We were there with a friend and they were doing meditation and music and how you could use mindfulness and music. And I was there helping out really in a lot of ways because my background is an event manager as well. And we did this Mayan Temescal, which is a sweat lodge experience. And I just connected to a light inside of me. I saw what I would say was my soul or my spirit. And it just lit me up. And I was so happy, you know, and to connect with that aspect of myself. I didn't fully understand it at the time, but that was the door that opened things up for me. And that was, oh, I know, February 2018. So
So was that when you were actually in the sweat lodge? Was it
yes,
the
yeah.
discomfort of the heat? And had you been fasting or anything like that? Or
No, no, and it was a gentle temescal. It wasn't intense. We were there with this lovely shaman who's still a friend of mine. His name's Timo. And some of the other people, my ex-husband was there as well with me. And I just remember I was afraid of the heat. I don't like being in saunas and things like that. So I remember just asking for, I don't know, for like a light to protect me and get me through it and set that intention. And I literally felt this light being kind of wrap its arms around me. And I had never experienced anything like that before. And I guess it was the opening of my clairvoyance too. I tend to see a lot of energy. The way I connect with energy is the beingness of it. So some people it will be straight knowing, it'll be feelings. If it's energy, I will connect to its being like angels, look like people, that kind of thing. And so this was the
yeah.
very first start of it. And I just kind of let myself go in and, I felt like I wasn't in the dark at all. It was so light. And I remember one of the gentlemen that was part of the retreat was in there and he said, you know what? I'm okay. I can leave now because there's so much light in this room that everything's going to be okay. And he let me sort of be on my own with the shaman and my husband. And I saw the shaman's spirit. They all looked like Mayans, which was really interesting because that was the energy we were in. And I saw my husband's spirit and it was mine and they were different colors. Like the shaman was purple and my husband's was green and mine was gold. And she was this gorgeous, beautiful Mayan young woman sort of dancing in the middle of this temescal in the sweat lodge. And she was reminding me that it was time to dance. I realize that now. And so I remember coming out and everyone at the retreat was like, one of the guys said, he said, you are a Vesuvius of light and love right now. Like I was just so high on the vibration, but I had no idea what it meant. No idea. But from
What
that, I started to explore it after that.
I was going to say, what do you do with that? Because had you even had a meditation practice up to that point?
No,
Just
nothing.
no, nothing.
Nothing. I was a corporate event manager and, but what had happened is, I was working in the big city. We were living in the suburbs of Toronto and the place where I live now, which is in cottage country on this beautiful 15-acre forested property was our cottage essentially or our country home. And in 2017, my kids went off to college and my career in event management was sort of changing. The industry was changing, and I had really been sort of laid off. I had found another job, and then that one sort of went away. It was like the universe was lining everything up for me. And we came up here in the woods, in nature, and I had my job was falling away. And I had these opportunities sort of starting to show up, and I was really questioning what I wanted. Like, what was I going to do next? I was in my fifth. I was like now 50, and it's hard to sort of think about what you want to do next because events weren't like that. Of corporate event management world was not really doing it for me anymore, and it was falling away, anyways. So, and so I had these opportunities just to kind of start to be with myself more, and you have to kind of redefine yourself. Empty nester, you know, moving out of a career I'd been doing for 25, 26 years. And so here I was, but they lined it up for me because I had this opportunity to go to this retreat. I had this awakening. And then, in town here is a beautiful circle of mediumship and psychics. And they were doing intuitive development, classes. And all of a sudden I had time to, you know, explore it. But even before then, I remember there was a moment, these people that were doing this retreat in Mexico, they were a startup travel company, and they came to the property about a month and a half or so after that Mexican experience, and to do some planning to see if we could do some other retreats. And while we were here, it was the full moon. It's so cliche, but it's so true. And the gentleman said, "Why don't we do a fire ceremony?" And we were like, "Okay, why not?" So we went up to my fire pit, and he did he did sort of a Mayan fire ceremony with sage, and it was kind of an indigenous mix of things. And we had drums, and we were kind of standing there and playing drums in the moonlight, and I felt kind of awkward, but I literally remember kind of sitting with myself, and I said, I had made the intention in Mexico to be open to everything. And I remember just saying, "Oh, screw it." And I threw my blanket over my shoulder and I started to dance. And I danced around the fire, and it felt so good and so freeing. And that was when the real switch went off. Because I remember the next day, my vibration was so high. I thought I was jacked up on caffeine, like I had had too much coffee. But what I realized was that it was my vibration. And the people that were visiting us wanted to go have a reading with the psychic mediums that were in town. So we went that morning, and we walked into her place, and she looked at us and she said, "What have you guys been up to? Because I felt your vibration in the parking lot." That's how much we were vibrating, and how we had kind of stepped into things. And so that kind of marks a real point. Like, there's different points you can see along your journey where you have those profound moments. And then from there, I started going to the intuitive development circles. And they were Thursday nights, and they were like sacrosanct. I didn't want to miss a Thursday night. It was sort of this ability to find the common ground with people. And I went to kind of explore my intuitive gifts, and to maybe learn how to speak to those that had passed. I had no idea what was waiting for me, but I kept going, and I kept trusting it, and learning more and more about connecting to your intuition and your psychic gifts. And that was like May of 2018. By July, my mentor and I had figured out I was a physical channel or an embodied channel where spirit kind of steps into you. And I feel it through my entire body, as well as seeing it outside of myself. It's like this combination of clairvoyance and clairsentience, which is really interesting. And I had to trust that. Like, my guides were showing up. And then they got me ready, and then the archangels showed up in the fall. And then my light language showed up a few months after that. And then my energy healing, and it just kept unrolling and unfolding. And every time along the journey, I found the right people to work with, the right mentors, the right circle of support and friendship. And the biggest thing is trust. You just have to trust it. Otherwise, I mean, there's moments along that journey where you think you're kind of going a little crazy.
Yeah.
But you just got to trust it.
Yeah. No, thank you for sharing. The one thing that jumps out for me during all that is almost this, you're saying yes to the universe, and then you you take the step, where I find so many people get caught in their heads and they hold back, and they don't allow themselves to free fall, to surrender into the trust and be guided
Yeah.
by source, which of course is really, really challenging especially when we're in that transition. Were you ready to step out of the corporate world and do, like, I'm done with that and I'm moving on
Yeah.
now? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
I realized if I look back, I definitely was. And I was I've had a great life. Like I haven't had any trauma or anything like that. I've had some really amazing experiences. I loved my career. And so there was none of that I felt like I needed to heal and all of those kinds of things. But there was always something missing. I felt restless. By the time I hit 50, I just felt restless. And I was like, there's something more. There's one piece of me that's missing. And then as soon as the spiritual piece came in for me, I just knew it was exactly where I was supposed to be. And there's that part of our intuitive senses that you know because you know, and there's no way that nothing else will sort of shake you from that foundation. And that's where you start to find the trust
Wow.
because,
And
yeah,
yeah, I'll dive into your experiences now in a moment, but I'm curious to take it back to, because you messaged me, fun fact, I'm an ex-Olympian, and and there's the Calgary Winter Games, if I'm not
Calgary Games in
mistaken,
88. Yeah.
in '88. And is it figure skating you were doing?
I was a Paris figure skater. Yes.
Paris figure. So to me, that looks extremely technical and in the present moment as well. Was there any part of that sport and those events that you felt connected, or did it feel very physical?
It was very physical, but it's very expressive. And so one of the things I'm learning about the spiritual journey is there is a real sense of creativity and expression to it. And so I would connect that back to the aspect of me that was sort of preparing, or my soul kind of knowing that it was at one point, eventually it was going to become that. But I did not have any real sense of spirituality. I grew up as a Catholic. I went to Catholic school. None of that ever resonated, but it was really my framework for spirituality. Um, as an Olympic athlete, you're taught visualization. So that I find actually, now that I'm actually just sort of thinking about this right now, the visualization, we used to like walk through our skating routines and we would imagine ourselves in ways that would allow us to bring down our stress and our anxiety. And it was all visualization, and essentially it's a guided meditation. And the world, my inner world, my connection to spirit is through story. It's like a giant story journey, a meditative journey where it's metaphor and story and visualization. So if I look back, my sports psychologist was almost supporting me and training me for what I'm doing now. But, for the Olympian me, when I look back and say, so how is that serving me now? It's really about confidence. And I call it my inner showgirl, that ability to stand up and be okay with speaking light language or talking about these strange topics in front of people. And the discipline to, once I decided I wanted to be on this path, sort of staying the path. So those types of qualities that in general come with being in elite sport, whether it's at the Olympic level or not, that's really what serves me now at this point in my life.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And when you go into your town with the intuitive training and the clairvoyance and those experiences were starting to happen, did you hold back, or were you happy to start talking about it? Because
I
now
did it
obviously
in
6
secret
years
for a little
on,
bit.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
I remember when I would only talk about it, maybe with my husband or my friends. Like that what was so great about the circle is you could talk about all these things and there was so much validation through it. Validation is so huge on this journey is to find those spaces and places where I mean, there's always the inner validation, but the external validation is really important. Um, and so it was really, I remember when I started my Instagram account, I did not have my name. I had my company name, The Subtle Shift, but I didn't have my name associated. I didn't have my name on in camera because I was not ready yet. You know, I'm an Olympian and I have that kind of definition and framework about myself. And I was still working, I had spent a lot of time in my event career working in the figure skating world. So I still kind of had that connection and then just the corporate world and even my family, you know, at 50, what are my parents going to think when all of a sudden their daughter is doing all of these strange things that they don't understand? And they don't necessarily understand now, but they see that I'm thriving and they see how happy I am and that there is potential to actually make a living doing this and sharing your gifts. So it's all big leaps. And I remember I got to a point where I was ready to talk about what I do on my personal Facebook page. That was going to be the big step. And it was around Canadian Thanksgiving in the fall. And I decided to do a little video about gratitude and thanking my angels and I talked about my connection to the angels. And I even did a little bit of light language. It was so terrifying. But what was amazing after I did it, I had 3 Olympic figure skaters reach out to me who had seen the video and were completely so interested to talk to me about it. And they booked sessions. And so they became clients. And
Wow.
that was the biggest validation I could have ever had, is to have that world that was so dear to me, the figure skating world, embrace it. But if you go back to what the question you had about being an Olympian, I'm not surprised that figure skaters have a spiritual kind of sense to them because we are so creative, so expressive. We're in touch with um, our creative essence, which is really our divinity in a lot of ways, if you think about it.
Yeah, absolutely. And for me as well, on my, like, there's getting to know your body. For me on the journey along the way, it's like, wow, I can actually, to be so in tune, I would imagine, out of almost every cell of your body to do what you do and have that sense of awareness. That's a lot of presence in training in
Yes.
meditation. So it doesn't
Yes.
surprise me. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. You're right. You're totally right. I hadn't actually thought about it that way, but I mean, the fact that I'm an embodied channel, a physical channel, and I am so aware of my body. Um, and when you channel divine energy, it is intense. And your guides, they start gradually, you know, they start gradually. But my experiences as that type of channel, my guides would literally step in and move my body. And for some reason, I was not scared. I was a little freaked out. I mean, you would be, right? But it just felt so natural that I was able, like you said, to just say yes to the next experience and yes to the next experience.
So I'm curious to know that once that started happening for you, because we spoke off air, I have similar experiences, which is why I love having these conversations to hear like the external validation and different people's perspectives and be able to share it with people. Is did you know who they were or what was working with you? How did you start to then?
Yeah, it was a
Even if you
combination
needed
of
to know.
things. Yeah, yeah, sometimes you don't need to. It was a combination of things. I have a beautiful spiritual teacher, a mentor that I still have now, and she's really important in my life. And she has been doing in the spiritual world since the 90s, and she's seen everything, and she's sort of trained in everything. And she's just this fount of knowledge. And so if I do have questions, I can go to her and she helps validate. And it's really interesting because we validate each other because I'll get information and then I'll share it. And she's like, oh, I just got that information a couple of days ago. And so we validate each other. So there would be those I'd be able to sort of say, this is what it felt like. This is what this being sounded like. This is the name I got. It would go that way. There was this other really, when I first started working with the Ascended Masters, there was this strange thing that would happen is somewhere in my awareness, someone would mention this particular being, like Sanat Kumara or Kuthumi or Kuan Yin or all of these different beings. And, um, and then what would happen is the next day I would start to channel them. And part of me started to wonder, is it sort of that influence? Was I just like getting influenced? But I couldn't share, like it was real. It was a real experience. So I started to accept that it was the way my guides were giving me a heads up that I was going to connect with this energy. And when I started to work with Archangel Michael, that's when the Ascended Masters started to come as well. They sort of went hand in hand. And I'm fortunate enough to actually have divine relationship, I would say, with these beings in a way that I communicate with them through conversation, but it's not always just like a conversation we're having now. It can be, but it's also through metaphor and synchronicities and symbols and signs. And they slowly but surely taught me my language of how I communicate with the divine. And so, but what Michael told me is that you're going to start to have visits by these divine beings, and they are going to bring you wisdom. And it started to be this really interesting exchange because I am an embodied channel. The energy has the experience of being in the physical for a moment. That was sort of the way I used to look at it. And then they would always leave me with a gift of wisdom. It might be a symbol or a teaching or a sigil of some sort. I didn't always understand what they meant, but over time they would often reveal themselves to be, oh, this is what the symbolism of this crystal. It would be an etheric crystal, like they would give me a sapphire or something. And then there was a combination of actually just Googling who are these masters, and then trusting the information that came through that I resonated with most, and then speaking to my friends to say, this is what I feel. Does this make sense? So it's a whole give and take sort of synchronous experience. I'm trying to figure it all out.
Yeah. And on your journey, I'm curious as well, how have you found when starting to work with that presence that comes in, then how that then translates into working with others that come and see you? So
like the divine beings that would come see me, or actual people.
Yeah. Both the divine beings that would come in and to work with you, then how that translates into working with
other people,
person that come. Yeah.
Right.
Because people say, oh, they come in and work, but it's like, well, how?
What does that mean, right?
Yeah.
It's been a process of evolution. And early on, it was about me getting comfortable with the frequencies of these divine beings, this high frequency, the wisdom, starting to understand who they were. It was like being in school, and Archangel Michael was my teacher, and we would sit down in meditation because I had the time, of course, like I said before, I was in this place of transition in my life. And so I would sit down and I would say, okay, Michael, what do you have to teach me today? And he would bring me on a journey. And some of that included these different beings that would show up day after day. And I was very deliberate and intentional about doing the meditation and setting that and teaching myself how to meditate and connect, right? It was this give and take. And then I started to understand which each of those frequency means. So Kuan Yin comes, it's about compassion. And sometimes some of the more galactic ascended masters were really about connecting to those galactic frequencies and understanding and that they're actually real, because when I started, I didn't know that there was galactic beings and galactic races and all of that stuff and elementals and so much trust trying to navigate. So those first few years were really just about learning at a very accelerated rate how to connect with those beings. But now when they come to when I have clients, and if some of those beings come through, when I do angel sessions, I connect with the archangel that's working in their field right now. And it usually reflects something that they need, because the archangels are the archetypes and they represent different sort of levels of consciousness, or aspects of our consciousness. Truth and strength and protection is Michael, and Raphael is healing, and Gabrielle is expression. And so those types of things will show up in someone's life. If someone's having to step into their truth, Michael will come. Michael comes often for someone who's really early on the path, because he's familiar and people can trust that energy. And then as you move along, like if Archangel Metatron shows up for you, you know you're ready to step into ascension. That's what he's all about, you know? And
Right.
so I started to understand what all of those different aspects of the archangels meant. And then I was able to bring that wisdom through channeled writings, and then through the energy work, integrate those frequencies and use their wisdom and their frequencies to clear out and amplify or heal, depending on what they needed in that moment now.
Okay. Do you feel they show up in forms that meet us where we are at?
100%. 100%. Yeah. My Archangel Michael is going to look completely different than your Archangel Michael. You may never see Michael as a being, but you're going to feel his energy in a certain way. Or you're going to see the colors of him, which is royal blue and silver. I find the aspects, the individuation of these archangels can be different for everyone, but the colors and the frequencies tend to be very consistent. So Raphael is green, and I see Gabriel as silver and gold. Michael is royal blue. And so those are the ways other people will connect. And as you start to connect with the energies, they feel different. So Michael is big and powerful, and very, very protective, you know. And he is the epitome of the divine masculine. So that knight in shining armor, real swagger kind of energy. He's really important with working the divine masculine right now. I get a lot of male clients, and he will come through and let them know that they can be that divine masculine knight in shining armor. The key is to bring the tenderness and the nurturing, because that's the aspect of Michael, that's his balance of the divine feminine, is that nurturing, like giving space for the divine feminine to be ready to be received, you know, and those kinds of things. So it's really, it's so different and it's so unique through each experience I have with each person that shows up and to work with me. It's really beautiful and
Yeah.
magical. This kind of thing right now, I call it the magic of the universe, because it really is.
Well, it is. It is funny. I'm listening to you talk, and I catch myself. I'm like, is a guy from Wales played rugby talking about angels on a podcast, right? And
Right?
so there's a part of me that's like, what is going on? Seriously, the
I know,
Welshman
right? How
in
did
me.
we get here?
How the hell did I get here? But then there's the other part of me that is like, wow, beyond the word and beyond the meaning or how we perceive the belief around the terminology that we use, because things can get lost in language itself. If I wish more men could experience, like you speak of Archangel Michael's energy, or have that divine moment of when something comes through that is so powerful, that is so connected to a source where we come from. It
Right,
will leave you floored, and it changes your life. Like it changes everything. You can't unlive or unlearn an experience like that. And once you start to embody it and actually feel it in every cell of your body, it yeah, uh,
right.
it
And
changes
one
everything.
of, yeah. And one of the things I've asked, particularly recently, is so what is it about connecting to these masters and these angels and creating this idea of divine relationship? Because what I feel is happening now is collectively for us, is that connection to our multidimensionality, that connection to our soul. And so being able at the beginning, and that's kind of what I'm feeling for you as you're experiencing these new beings and connecting to that kind of angelic and ascended master, is they are tangible aspects of the divine, right? And so they're going to
Mm.
teach you what it feels like to connect with your own divine self, because in a multidimensional sense, they really are a part of you. And so they open a doorway to starting to step in and understanding more and more about your own personal divinity and where it all fits in for you. Because the big message I'm getting now is our ability to connect to our multidimensionality, which is our soul expressions, our past lives. But I'm told that it's better to call it soul expressions because there is no time. That this is how we are going to start. It's a tool for transformation to heal the aspects of ourself that we can heal energetically that might be showing up now, but are from a past soul or another soul expression. But also being able to create the relationship with our soul that has so much wisdom to offer. And when you can start to feel that, you realize how eternal you are. You know, I mean, this personality of us will pass on at some point, but the true essence of who we are will live on forever in new and amazing ways. And if we can start to create a relationship with that, can tap into all that wisdom. And so it's really exciting and kind of wondrous and a little bit trippy trying to get your head wrapped around it.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I just imagine where the world would be if we all were kind of on this path,
Right.
really diving into
And
our soul
everybody
essence.
can do it too, you know, that's what I'm learning. And it's fascinating. I have talked to so many people recently who they aren't what you would call awake or spiritual or connecting to energy in the same way that we are. But they'll say, you know, I swear to God, I must have been a witch in a past life, or I feel like I had a friend that said, you know, I feel like I might have starved to death because I have this thing with food. And like they're literally and just starting to kind of get a sense that maybe there's possibilities outside of this experience in this now moment that relates to their life now and how you can
Yeah,
learn and heal from that. It's
yeah,
fascinating.
totally, totally. So I'm curious to ask you about light language because it's
Hmm.
something that's come up in conversations on the podcast. I don't know a huge amount about it, to be honest with you, but I'd love for you to share what you've learned and your experiences with it and what it's for.
Right. So I opened up to light language. It was sort of that same 2018 year where I was going through. It was like started to work with our angels, the ascended masters, and then the light language. And I consider light language to be the language of our multidimensionality, the language of our soul. And it is a language of energy, sound, and frequency. And it can be spoken, it's signed, it can be written, sung. Art comes with light language because it's energy and expression through codes. And the first time I heard light language, it was in a meditation that one of my spiritual mentors had played for us. And I thought it was Mayan when I heard the language because I had been in Mexico and I just thought, oh, it's this ancient language. And she said it was light language. And, but it really resonated with me. And so I did the deep dive into YouTube to look for different things. And I saw people speaking it, but none of it was resonating until I found a woman named Jamie Price. And she has a really great book on light language. And she became my teacher as well on I took a course on how to build it into my practice. But I saw her do the light language and it just completely resonated with me. And I believe that it activated me at that moment because about 4 days later, I was in meditation with Archangel Michael and I started speaking this language. And I was used to channeling out loud, but I had never spoken this strange language. And it just started to pour out of me. And as it did, it was like a dam broke in the middle of my heart and everything came pouring out. It was so profound. It was like I had come home to myself and I just wept and I was speaking this crazy language. And it just went from there. And I just couldn't stop. And I'd walk through the forest and practice. And then I got brave enough to do it for people. And then I eventually added it to my practice. Because what light language does from a multidimensional perspective it's non-linear and very very multi-layered. And but what it does is it speaks to the subconscious. It's your heart and your soul. And so what I like to tell my clients is if you had a problem with forgiveness or anger or love and you didn't want to talk about it, like that would be very triggering. The light language comes in on the down low and speaks to your soul, kind of speaks to you at that subconscious level and can tr- like transform, heal, break it up, and really start to transform things and change it. It can do things like activate your expansion and activate what we call the crystalline DNA and light codes that we all, I believe, our energetic self carry, and it's channeled, so it comes through your higher self. And when I first started speaking it, I thought it was sort of beings outside of myself that I was channeling the light language. But the more and more I understand the idea of multidimensionality and that our soul is so many different aspects of so many different things. And then you connect that to the whole idea of unity consciousness. So what I'm really doing is I'm channeling aspects of myself, and it could be galactic. It can be angelic. It
It's
can be
wild.
elemental. It can be ancient earth, and all the frequencies are different. And your light language might sound different than my light language, because of the origins of our soul and where we're pulling it in from the higher consciousness of our multidimensionality and the divine beings that we're
It's
working with.
funny. I gotta share this. It's never happened on a podcast. As you're talking, I got a hit about it, and I thought I was going to I thought I was going to just fall off
Oh,
the chair. Then it's like Jesus Christ.
it's
So I
because
have
you're ready.
I have a like honestly, it felt like something shot out my heart, but it hit me on the head at the same time, like the energy. So I have a question for you because it's made me think about that for a moment. Because at the same time, while going through that, I just want to be honest. Like a little bit of fear came up, going, "Oh,
Mm-hmm.
like a like
It can be strange because
because it's
one, it's channeling. So if you're not used to that feeling of channeling, it can be scary. And so, and I think that's one of the reasons why I started to cry when it really came through for me, is because it was so emotional. And sometimes the fear is really emotion, it's just that, what is
yeah,
this kind of thing, the unknown. And so I mean, when I do any kind of spiritual work, I have gotten to the point where I don't have to ask anymore, but it's highest and best. I only work with the highest and best and those divine energies. And so if you're working that way, you can always be grounded in that sense of safety for that.
yeah,
But
absolutely.
it,
Because the question I wanted to ask you, like, it made me think about different experiences as I'm going on my journey. Anyway, because your I guess awakening has been so rapid, like it just happened, and then you've just gone on off a completely different trajectory. Was there any purging? Was there any of the old self or becoming
oh,
unwell at all, or anything like that, and being laid
yes.
up? Oh, you were good.
It is this is a journey. It's the messy journey. We have to shed aspects of ourselves. And even though like I said earlier, I haven't had a traumatic life. Like I haven't, had really awful things happen to me, but there is still lots to purge. And from a multidimensional perspective, this is where I've done a huge amount of healing is, the, I like, because being an old soul and really starting to connect to all the different expressions that this soul has been, there's so much purging and healing, and then we're doing it as light workers. We're doing it on behalf of the collective. And so, just, so it's always a mirror. It's like the micro and the macro. If I'm dealing with something like, I don't know, judgment, or I can feel, I'm purging shame of some sort or blame, and like all those different kind of core wounds, they'll show up, self-worth. If it's something that's related to my own personal experience or a soul expression of my own, it's usually being reflected in the collective at the time. Or I know that I am helping doing that. I work really, really closely with my divine guide. His name is Jeremiah. And we have spent lifetime after lifetime after lifetime together. And over my spiritual journey, I've realized that he has been all my guides. And all of those guides that I began to meet at the beginning of my journey was reflections of relationships that we have had. And we are exploring this divine union and separation. So the opposite of that. And all of these different lifetimes we've had together have been reflections of that. And I have been clearing those lifetimes of losing each other and finding each other. And it's just been this wondrous journey, but it has taken a lot of trust, and you have to work really hard to get here, you know? Um, but it's messy, but it's also really beautiful if you can really see the gifts that come with it. And,
Mm.
you know,
When did when you were actually, when you were saying you live in the forest, and you could spend time working with Archangel Michael was coming through, and like, how much time were you spending each day in meditation? Like,
um, I would say probably an hour.
okay.
But then I would also like the middle of the night, the old witching hour, they would show up. So,
Hmm.
and there's spiritual, like I learned lessons in spiritual boundaries because there is no time over there, and they would show up in the middle of the night. And I was so excited and I loved it so much. It was such an adventure that eventually you have to kind of set your working hours or your office hours, right? And, so there's so many different lessons that you're learning along the way. But and I do about an hour a day, and it's building it into your life. And I tell a lot of the people that I'm working with, because I know if you're got a corporate job or any job really, or you're a mom with kids, like how do you fit this into your life? And Michael he used a phrase called practical divinity, and I really like that. It's like, how do you weave your spirituality into your life now? And is it just making sure you have space for 15 minutes to have that cup of tea and like journal or sit in contemplation? Not everybody can meditate. The other thing is that the definition of what meditation means for you can be many things. It doesn't have to be, like emptying the mind and sitting there for an hour and seeing what floats in there. It can be a guided meditation. That's a great way. It also really exercises your imagination, which is a big part of connecting to your intuition. Could be walking in the forest. It could be just going down to the park with your kids and like letting them play and like finding that moment of silence. Or, I mean, it's never silent with kids, but just getting out of the house and being with what you love and all of those
Yeah.
kinds of things. So
Yeah.
it's, it's,
Well,
yeah. I was just going to say there's no rules to how you do it.
no, totally, totally. Because at the end of the day, you want to be present and living your life as well. We could get so caught up
Hmm.
and use this to bypass the very things that we need to sort of face and look at and
Right.
work with on a daily basis as well. Because I have
Absolutely.
just had our second baby. He's just turned 4 months old. So
Oh, wow.
um,
Congratulations.
thank you. So it's at the moment, it's everything's a juggle, and
Right.
all that.
Yeah. But
constant
maybe it's when you're like
constantly.
up in the middle of the night doing the feeding and just sitting in that quiet with yourself, that can be that moment of, or sending divine energy through to that child, just connecting with that energy and knowing what it feels like. And I can kind of see it that
Ex-
way.
exactly. That's how I see it. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And creating sacred spaces in your house. I was thinking about this the other day. We all, like, people have man caves and craft rooms and, all these different things that they like to create these little spaces in their game room, movie room. Well, what about a sacred corner, where you can have some crystals or cards or a candle or a beautiful painting that just makes you feel good and allows you to connect to that creative space within you, which I just feel like is divinity anyways. And that can be a start, just something to remind you to stop and reflect on that aspect of yourself.
Mm. So I'm just curious, before we start wrapping up the podcast, for people listening to this, if they're like sitting there, they could be driving the car like, oh, I want to connect to my guide more, or I'd love to experience an archangel come in, or whatever it might be. What would you say to someone that's on that path?
I would say that it's all about setting intention for one. The angels need to be invited in, but it takes practice. And trust. So really starting to tune in to your intuition. And there's lots of tools that you can use to do that. Guided meditation, which will allow, like some really creative guided meditation will take you on a journey and ask you to open a box or, like what are the symbols, or someone's come to give you a message, and then starting to trust that and paying attention to those signs, because they will be validated in your outer world if you're paying attention, or they'll resonate really deeply. And then I love things like oracle cards. They are really great at helping you sort of understand what's going on in your world. You can pull some cards in the morning and see how your day goes and come back and realize that they were speaking to you. But when it comes to the angels, it's about really sort of finding that space to go within, to like sit in your heart, and then set the intention that you're going to start to connect to the angels, and then pay attention to what comes up. And it's similar to meditation. So they'll start to bring you signs and synchronicities outside of you. You can ask for signs, specific signs. You can ask them to bring you songs and music. I really love that because there's always messages in it. Archangel Michael's really good at that, starting, and you can ask to start to work with him first. He's really such a great teacher, and he's here as sort of the most connected to humanity in a lot of ways. He's that vibration, and find books or teachers or personalities or friends or mentors that really connect with you. There's no rules to how we get to our spirituality. And so people are going to connect a lot with what I do, but they may not, but there's going to be somebody out there that they do want to connect with. And that's why I think as energy healers and light workers, and we all are creating our own toolbox of different modalities and creating our own thing, because there's so many of us coming and looking for answers to our spirituality, or are looking to connect to that aspect of ourselves, that there's going to be a need for all of us to do all kinds of different things so that we can work with everyone. And that's really exciting.
Totally. And what's next for you, Denise? Like in terms of your future progress, because you mentioned you're leaning into retreats as well, which would be
So I'm
with your events background.
Yes,
cool.
yes. So, you wonder why you've done all these things in your life. Well, nothing's a waste of time, right? I got my inner showgirl from my Olympian, and I've got my event background for retreats. So I'm starting to work on that and looking at doing some international ones. I do personal one-on-one retreats here, and eventually I'll add some weekend ones. I'm writing a book, which is really exciting, with my guide, Jeremiah. So it's been this really interesting process of co-creation, a little bit of channeling, a little bit of writing, a lot of soul stories within it. So that's been, I've never written, I used to consider myself not a writer, and it's sitting down to do this has been one of the most rewarding experiences, to start to kind of tell the stories of my awakening and Jeremiah and I's connection. And he's just got so much wisdom, and it's all about multidimensionality and divine union. So there's that piece of it. And then, just trying to build community and connect more, because that's so important, to find that sense of community so that we can share. And there are people that say, I'm having these strange experiences, and we can validate them for them. So there's lots going on. I just feel like, I'm just ready to just get out there and start doing more and more creation and more work. Exciting.
Yeah, beautiful. Yeah, that sense of community is so important. Is it, like I was sharing off air, we've run, I think, 21 retreats now. I can't remember, I've lost count, but the the connections that come from these, like once people go through 5 days together on a journey, there's a connection there that's from the soul, and
Yeah.
friendships are bonded for life. And it's beautiful to witness constantly.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so transformative. Just, I can have small 3-hour events about spring equinox and different things like that. And we have, I don't know, 10 or 11 people together, perfect strangers. And after 3 hours of this connection, you can see how they've changed or they've got a new perspective, It's just changing perspectives, really, to opening them up to infinite possibilities and trusting it.
Yeah.
Gotta trust it.
Absolutely. Trust. And do you work remotely on Zoom
I do.
or anything like that?
Yes, I
You
do.
do.
So yeah, absolutely. And I would love to grow that part of it. It's, I really like working with people from all over.
I'm sure you will after this podcast.
Thank you. That excites me.
Yeah, no problem. Last question for you, Denise. With everything we covered today, is there anything you want to leave people to ponder on?
I think I just really want them to start to ponder the possibility of their multidimensionality. Like really start to trust that there is so much more to their soul than this lifetime now, because there's so much potential to learn. And also pay attention to the signs and synchronicities around you, because your higher self and the divine are speaking to you in ways that are so magical. Like the energies right now, sometimes I feel like I'm standing in a vortex of synchronicities. It's just coming at me, numbers and signs and what's showing up on my social media feed and the people that are reaching out to me to have me on a podcast.
There you go. Yeah. There you go. Yeah, absolutely. So, I'll make sure there's a link in the show notes for everyone, but could you just say your website out loud? Your URL as well?
It's thesubtleshift.ca.
Thesubtleshift.ca.
Thesubtleshift.ca. And yeah. And that's my social media as well. So Subtle Shift.
Okay. Are you on Instagram?
I'm on Instagram and Facebook, and I'm on YouTube as well. I'm building that channel. I've got to start adding more. I'm working on it.
Ah, fantastic. Yeah. That's me as well. Working on it. YouTube.
Yeah.
For sure. Yeah. Well, beautiful. Thank you so much for coming on, Denise. It was really lovely to connect. And
it was so enjoyable. And thank you.
You're very welcome. You're very welcome indeed. Thank you, my lovely.